Welcome, everybody. My name is Mina Jane. I'm the director of the Ashland Public Library in Massachusetts, and I'm super excited to tell you that I am here with Sherry Thomas, one of my very favorite romance writers, but she is also an amazing mystery writer. We were talking about her book, The Librarians, that just came out a few weeks ago. Was it a few weeks ago? It came out
It
recently.
was. It was. It was came out September 30th. So yeah.
Okay, cool.
So it was
Um,
several weeks ago.
and of course, with a name like the Librarians, I had to invite her to speak. And so we are going to be talking about the Librarians and the romances and the Lady Sherlock series. But before we start, I just want to say a couple things. One is I'd like to thank the Friends of the Ashland Public Library for supporting all of our programs. Couldn't do this fun stuff without them. I'd like to thank Sherry for letting us share this program with other libraries because, of course, when libraries work together, we totally make magic. And I'd like to say that we're going to be talking, no slides or anything like that. So the chat will stay open. Feel free to chatter with each other throughout. I will try to pay attention to it. But if you have questions, please put your questions in the Q&A, which is a button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can buy signed books by Sherry from Aesop's Fable, my very favorite local indie bookstore. And I will put a link of that in the chat as well as in a recap email I send out to everybody. So Sherry Thomas, like I said, wrote one of my very favorite romance books called Not Quite a Husband. It was a while ago and many books ago, but I still remember how awesome it was. So of course, like I said, the Librarians came out, I was like, of course. So I think this is really funny about you, Sherry, is that you decided your goal to write is to write every kind of book you enjoy reading. So you've written romance, fantasy, mystery, and a wuxia-inspired duology. I mean, is that all or is there more?
What did you say? Romance, fantasy, mystery, and wuxia inspired geology.
Mhm.
I wrote an extra wuxia book. I wrote a young adult Mulan adaptation. So
Ooh.
that is also wuxia based. And yeah, and I've written some odd stuff on the periphery. I have written a couple of speculative novellas. They're romance. So one is set like in space, the proper space opera, and another just recently came out as part of the After the End collection, which is was spearheaded by Ari Hazelwood and Adriana Herrera, and was a Kickstarter project with eight novellas in a collection set in it's a dystopian romances. So mine was set like 800 years in the future, but very much here on Earth. Like it was set in like the not exactly the South China Sea, more like the sea around the Philippines.
Mhm. So basically, you can do anything. Okay, so let's get started with my first question, of course, is like to tell us more about yourself. I know you came here when you were 13, English isn't your first language, but yet you are this incredible writer. So tell us more about yourself, and then we'll talk about all of your books, but definitely The Librarians.
Let's see, what's there to know about me? I learned English mostly from reading romance and science fiction. I began as a romance writer, so of course, in like my bio stuff, they used to say like she learned English from reading historical romance, and I did a lot of English.
Mhm.
But I also read almost an equal amount of science fiction when I was growing up, because that was romance. I had to sit on the floor of the bookstore to read, or standing before a rack, get from the library, or standing before a spinning rack in the grocery store. But science fiction, there were a ton of at the university library where my mom was a grad student. So we lived like right on the edge of the university. I used to ride my little bicycle to the university library and just go through like, all the science fiction titles one by one. Um, while sitting in the library, of course, because I couldn't check them out. Uh,
Well,
and let's see, and then a very chance encounter. So I was originally going to go to the usual route for immigrants, children. No, I was a first generation immigrant, so I was going to go the usual route, going to go college, grad school, and then find a job. And I was because I was bilingual, so everybody thought I should go into international relations. And I didn't really know what international relations entail. It sounded good. I figured I probably work in an embassy. And all I know about embassies is that, hey, maybe I'll be wearing, cocktail dresses and eating lots of hors d'oeuvres. Because all I know about embassies is like diplomatic receptions. I don't know anything about the grunt work, the dangerous stuff. And all that. So so that's what I was looking forward to. And but right before I even applied to grad schools and got accepted to a few. But right before I could make a decision as to which grad school to go, I found out I was pregnant. So my life took a very different turn. Instead of going to grad school on the East Coast, I became a stay-at-home mom in Austin, Texas. And one day when my son was 1.5, I went to the public library, of course, and there I found a new to me book by an author I read a lot as a teenager. I was only 23 then, so not that old. Um, but on that day, particularly maybe because it was my mood, maybe because I had so little free time, um, that book I didn't like. And normally when I don't like a book, I just lay it aside. But that book just like made me kind of infuriated in a way because it took away all my free time that day.
Mm.
My free time was like really precious because my son's nap time, that was the only little free time I had. It took away all my free time. It didn't give me any pleasure in return. Don't know what happened, but when my husband came back home that day, I said, you know what? I would like to write historical romances. I figured, heck, if, that book could be on the New York Times bestseller list, like maybe I could make some money writing books too. So it was always, so the beginning of my career was very commercially bent. I
Mhm.
was like, I could do this to make some money. Um, and in the subsequent years, gosh, my God, I just turned 50 this year. So in the nearly 3 decades since that fateful day, the longer the time passes, the more I look back and go, what happened on that day? Like, because before that, I wasn't a writer. Like in my whole life, I maybe started like a few stories and always gave up after 5 pages and without any regrets whatsoever. But that day, once I said to my husband, I would like to do this, I started doing research, I started writing, and just like it's almost as if it was meant to be. So it was quite amazing. But it took me 8 years back. This was in the Jurassic era when you couldn't self-publish that easily. So it took me 8 years after I started to get a New York contract, and that was for Private Arrangements, my first romance. Um, and then I wrote 9 romances and started running out of ideas, not positions. I always want to specify to people. I once even wrote a rather, pointed. I once even wrote a rather pointed blog post called Two Positions. Because I said I've only ever used 2 positions in my book, horizontal and vertical. And I was like, that's sufficient. I'm not leaving romance because I ran out of positions, just because I ran out of story ideas or ideas that I wanted to take that much time and effort to write in that place. And by that time, I was quite inspired by the BBC Sherlock, and I also am a huge fan of Laurie R. King's Mary Russell and Sherlock Holmes series. So I just wanted to gender bend Sherlock Holmes a little further. And fortunately for me, um, at the time, publishers were actually running out of romance/romance adjacent writers because they were all leaving for self-publishing. So when they heard that I wanted to move to historical mysteries, they actually didn't, there was no pushback. They just said, here's a 3 book contract, have at it. And I was like, you know, so that's how I switched genres without any friction whatsoever. And fortunately, it wasn't meant as I'm not very good at like guessing where my career is going. So it wasn't exactly meant as like a deliberate career pivot. I just ran out of things I want to say in one genre, and it's like there's something I want to say in another. And so yeah, so that has so far that has worked out. And And then my publisher, a few years ago, when my contract was up for renegotiation, they said, we would like to take two more Lady Sherlock books, and we would like you to write a book that's like Thursday Murder Club, except with librarians. So at that time, I hadn't read Thursday Murder Club yet, so I had to go first read it. Um, and then and then they were like, yes, so would you write it? And I'm like, sure, why not?
So would you say that librarians are the new hot thing in, literature?
I have no idea. It wasn't until I was about to write a book about librarians that I thought I should read um, books about library or librarians, and then I was like, wow, there's actually a ton of stuff. There's like I actually didn't know that there was like a very niche genre of librarians and cats solving mysteries for one thing,
Yes, those cozy
and
mysteries for sure.
yes, yes, and then there were all kinds of things like the Midnight Library, and it was just yeah, librarians. Yes, were hot. Libraries and librarians were hot because why not, right? Is there a better place under the sun than a library? I simply cannot imagine. I mean,
No,
books
and
a
librarians,
bookstore is almost as good, but for somebody like me who grew up without, who grew up without like allowances in my pocket, like library is like no, it's not second place to heaven because I've never been to heaven. So library is heaven on earth.
I agree. I want to say, and I'm going to get to the questions in just a minute, but the librarians, your book, The Librarians, is, I feel like you did such a masterful job of making the library, the setting, an actual character. You could just feel how it felt in there, safe or weird or, like unexpected. So, how was that for you writing, since you hadn't written this kind of book before, a contemporary mystery, cozy mystery? How was it for you to create that setting for librarians to solve a mystery?
um, that's the easiest part actually because I just used my own library. This is a library that's 3 miles from my house. This is a library I've been going to since I moved to the north of Austin in, gosh, 1998 or 1999. I can't quite remember which year that was. So yes, that's been my home base library for the past quarter century.
Mhm.
Somebody said Spicewood in it just popped out a comment that says Spicewood. Yes, it's a Spicewood Spicewood Springs Public Library in Austin. That's one of our local branches, and I think it's one of the best branch libraries in Austin. So I just thought, well, it to me it's quite the perfect library. I don't know. Every time I walk into it, I just feel happy. So I
Mhm.
was like, I don't know what else I can do. Like I have to learn more about libraries and everything, but this location is already right here, and it just both so ordinary and just so so fantastic. So and somebody said, "Where's Spicewood?" Spicewood is actually a place in Texas, but this library is named after a road called Spicewood Springs. It sits on a road called Spicewood Springs, so it's called the Spicewood Springs Public, the library branch. Um,
So,
and everything about the library is almost exactly taken from. So so at the so some days people who enjoy the book can just stop by and like it's exactly as described.
we have to do that because I really did feel like you described a library, such a specific library, incredibly well. And the librarians who have their skills and you know, their their personalities that they bring to the job. But then also, you really did a great job, I thought, of, um, well, maybe this is the question I have for you. Why did you choose to have every chapter written by different characters' perspective, or most chapters?
I mean, I'm not sure every chapter is written by a different. Every scene is written almost like I don't think I changed POV point of view by chapter, but are you talking about why I chose to write every person's perspective, every main
Yeah.
character?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I went by
Well,
chapter, but that's not the right word. But like you
right.
did.
Yes. Yes. Well, because that's what Thursday Murder Club was like. And I was like, they wanted Thursday Murder Club, but with the librarians. And that had oh, somebody says I keep coming in and out. Am I cutting in and out, or is that just
I'm fine. I
technical?
can hear you fine. So I'm just going to respond to her that it's on a street in Spicewood, on Spice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in Northwest Austin, so this is where it is. And yeah, and also because other ensemble casts, that's how typically ensemble casts are written this way. They have different characters' point of view. That's what makes it ensemble. You get to see everybody. You get to hear from everybody. You get to know their inner thoughts and see how they perceive the world.
Hmm. But it's a choice, right, to do it that way because sometimes there's only first person perspective. You don't never ever hear from any of the other characters. Just
True.
the
Yes. Mhm.
so I really loved it because I felt like I got to know all of your characters pretty well. I mean, I'm going to say it wasn't every chapter, but it was specific characters that Sherry wrote their point of view, and I was so like I just could hear it, like I could hear the audiobook, like different voices in their perspective. So, anyways, I thought it was wonderful. So, what was the idea or the inspiration around the actual mystery? Because I hope there weren't two murders in your local library.
No, at least I don't know any murders that ever actually happened in my local. And in the end, I took care that the murders didn't happen in the library because I felt like that would, that is my local library.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, I don't want to do any gruesome things in it. So it was just like the murders happened after a particular evening, but neither there was no bodies in the library. Although at the beginning, because I know this library so well and the staff there know me, so when I approached one of them and said, "Hey, I am writing a book about librarians, and I plan to set in this very library," and this gentleman whom I've known for a while said, "Oh, let me show you this." So he was the one who opened the door, that door you never notice outside the meeting room, to the side of the meeting room, and say, "Look, there's this secret staircase going up to this like little vent space or this little crawl space where it's for the HVAC system and all that, so maintenance crawl space." And I was like, and for the longest time, I tried to put a body up there, but it's just really difficult. I was like, something is just not logical because, like, how did this body get up there in the first place, and the keys and everything? You have to assume the librarians are still doing their job. They just aren't leaving it open for anybody who want to crawl up there and die up there. And so I gave it up in the end, along with thinking, you know what, it doesn't need to be the body doesn't need to be found in the library. Like, I want the library to remain open if at all possible.
I love it. So the other thing about this book is it wasn't just one thing. Like there was romance, there was mystery, there was this friend group that sort of you created out of people that were so disparate. So when you started writing this, were you thinking like of all these aspects that you could bring into the story?
No, I have such a tough time with this book. Normally, for a book, I worry about plot, because I knew plotting was something I had to learn. I never used to have trouble with characters, but for this book, I just had a heck of a time, like pinning down everybody's character. And it was seriously, at one point, I was thinking maybe I should give back my advance and like let them find somebody else to write this book. Like, that thought has never occurred to me in my life. I didn't end up doing it. I never picked up the phone to call my agent to say that was what I was thinking. But I thought about it every day for a while,
Wow.
until I guess for me, books have always been this thing that at first I don't know where to enter. I might have a story idea, but um, I might even have lots of ideas about it, but I don't know where to enter. I don't know how to put things together. I don't know what these people want and why they do what they do. Like for some books, they're just like that. For some books, the character just seem to they just feel like characters. They don't feel like real living people for a long time. They just don't. And then you just keep writing and keep writing. And you just keep inhabiting them. You just keep writing and rejecting and almost like fitting things around them. And then suddenly one day they just fall into themselves. They become people. They become people with their own voices. Like they then I don't feel like I'm inventing a past for them anymore. I feel like, oh, this is just something about you I didn't know yet. I'm discovering things about you now, and they have their own ideas, and they start driving the plot, their relationship, their past, their everything. So I don't want to be like too woo and say it's kind of like magic, but it just a little bit in the sense that obviously I'm doing this, but I am also with every book waiting for the moment when it becomes like this, that it becomes a story that draws me in rather than a story I need to pull out of my head with like a lot of effort. So yes, I think it definitely happened with the librarian at some point along the way. And then I kept my advance. And and in fact, my agent didn't know I had such thoughts until my editor read the complete draft for the first time. I really liked it and said, "This is good. This is all that." And I said, "Phew, I'm so happy that because I was almost going to, and my agent is like, well,
What? Oh, that's funny. Well, I think the way that you expressed it in terms of the magic is true for the reader. Like I know I read it and I was like, wow, these characters are fully formed. Like I feel like I know them. I feel like I want to work with them, except I don't necessarily want to deal with a dead body. But but it was wonderful. Like I think as you said, it just came together beautifully. I am going to ask a couple of
thank you."
questions that are from the audience right now because they kind of flow into what you were just saying. Can you please share your writing process? How do you motivate yourself to keep writing after all these years? But also, um, you know, are you a pantser or a plotter?
Okay, so that's two different questions. I'll answer whether I'm a pantser or a plotter first. I used to be a complete pantser. I used to be a complete pantser and like wrote very happily and freely, um, which was why it took me so long to get published. I think was the reason because I did not understand story structure, and I could go on and on about story structure. I give whole like 4 hour long workshops about story structure. So I will not launch completely into it and bore everybody with it. But basically, story structure is what make people love stories. It's the way the story is built that make people like just fall headlong into it and get carried away. All great stories that are not transformative, but that will transport you have great stories. They have other things too, but at their core, they have a great structure. So I didn't understand that. I knew how to do character, I knew how to do conflict, I knew how to do a lot of other things, but I didn't know how to put it together and to have things move and breathe and have the reversals and abrupt changes and all that things that make a story exciting to read. So when my first historical romance, I had written it as my first ever manuscript. And then 5 years later, I found it in like not necessarily a trash bin, but just like in a box. And I read it from the floor up. And what I did to it was I gave it a good structure, but I didn't understand what I did. I just thought, oh, I know how to write romances now. Like, and for the next 3 books, which were my first 3 to be written under contract, I really suffered because my editor kept rejecting my first draft like completely, and I was just like pulling my hair out. And so even though at that time I didn't know what I learned in rewriting all those books again and again, story structure, or at least a feeling of story structure, was what I learned. A feeling of when a story might be going off the rails. That even though things are still happening, on the whole, it has collapsed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It has just lost its marbles. The story has lost its marbles. So I used to be able to write happily without knowing the story has lost its marbles. Now I write more haltingly, hunting for the marbles as I go along.
But you
So
have
so
found the marbles.
I am still not a plotter in the sense that I never had that kind of vision. I have no idea what's going to happen to a story. Sometimes even when I know exactly how a story is going to end, which doesn't happen very often, but at times it happened, it's like I am here and there's like a distant destination, like a shining castle on the hill, but in between there's this jungle and whatever I have to hack my way through. So I still don't have that story vision that let me know, that let me be able to outline. So I still have to write and then to like kind of like just grope my way through the thicket to find my way to the castle on the hill. So that is what my now, so my process now is I write in iterations. I will write, and then when I hit a point when I can't write anymore, then I go, okay, so this is at a point where a decision needs to be made, or have I already made a decision? It's a wrong decision. Is that why I can't go any further? Like, do I need to adjust characters? Do I need to adjust plot? Do I need to adjust something else about the story? And I push it forward a little more until the next, major turning point. But to me, it's just the point where I can't write forward anymore without thinking more holistically about the story. So it happens in several iterations. When I'm lucky, it takes about 3 or 4 iterations. With this current Lady Sherlock book, the first complete draft I have, which is just right about done today, like took me 7 times to reach it. Like that was how bad it was. Took 7 iterations. As for what keeps me motivated, in the simplest term, this is what I used to say. What I will not do for love and money, I will do for deadlines. You give me a firm deadline, you give me somebody on the other side tapping their foot, going, when am I seeing this? I will like basically, twist my brain like a rag to get this book to you somehow. But in another sense, I am fortunately that I am still excited about the stories that I write. I've never quite lost the enthusiasm for it because I guess, when I wanted to change, I could, I was able to change. I was always able to write things that interested me. And I actually love being given things to write, being given ideas to write. So like this time they said, would you like to write a book about, bunch of librarians solving a mystery? And I'm like, sounds interesting. And before that, even the Mulan adaptation wasn't my own idea. Like one day, my agent just came around and said, I just spoke to this particular editor whom she admired a lot, and says she's looking for a English language adaptation of the original ballad of Mulan to be released when the live action Mulan hit the movie theaters. And my agent said, I recommended you. And I was like, I've never given Mulan 2 thoughts in my whole life.
My gosh.
But I can see why you might think I might be the person because I'm from the right country and I'm even literate in that language and I do write martial art based things. I can see why you might think I might be the perfect person for it, even though I really wasn't. But I was like, okay, like bring it on. I should write, I should write something like that. And so basically every time, so I've always been able to write different things. And when writing the Lady Sherlock mysteries, even though they're all mysteries, there have been very different books. There have been heist books. There have been like books searching for missing people. There have been books, set on the sea, set abroad. There's been and there's a love story. As long as there's a love story, my interest will always be somehow engaged. So that is the
same here.
That is what still motivates me to keep writing because the story is interesting.
And we love it. I think as a reader, we also know when things are going off the rails. And I haven't found that with your books. Like, even though it might feel that way when you're writing it, when you bring it all together, we love it. And that's another question is that around how complex your mysteries are. How do you tie everything together, especially given that sort of iteration thing that you do?
What I do is let's see. Oh yeah, I happen to have one. So I do have a I do keep a journal, not very diligent journal keeper, but I do try to keep it up. And every journal I've had lately, so in the front it will be my own stuff. In the back it will be all these. It will be in pencil, and it will be all story stuff. It will be like story questions I ask myself, like, okay, what's going to happen here? Do I know what's going to happen in the next scene? Should I list things? And then as most of the building block of a mystery fall into place, but then I'm left with all these threads. So then I will start writing them down one by one as I remember them. As soon as I remember something I haven't tied up, I will like write it down so that then later I will go, okay, that still has to be done. That still has to be done. So I go and tick them off one by one. Because otherwise, yeah, it is kind of overwhelming sometimes the amount of, and also I'm the kind of person who like everything properly tidied up. I don't like to bring something up unless it will be useful and meaningful to a story.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that's true. Your stories are really tight. There's not a lot of extraneous stuff like
Because I don't love writing itself that much. I like just the typing thing. I don't really love all that much.
I'm learning so much about you. Okay, so Susan wants to know, what's your favorite genre to write?
What is my favorite genre to write? Um, don't know if there's a favorite genre to write, but I think my favorite thing to write will always be a love story. My favorite thing to write. I don't know why. I just, it's just like people say, why do you love to eat something? What do you like to eat the most? This is what I like to eat. This is what I like to write the most. My favorite thing to write will always be a love story, just because I don't know why. It's delicious. It's like yum yum. It's a lot to read.
Well, and I want to go back to those early stories, the private arrangements and Not Quite a Husband. I know somebody had mentioned that one of her favorite books is The Luckiest Ladies in London, and you had mentioned some others before we started talking. So your books were always real. Your romances were so different. I always saw it and I wondered if it was because now that I'm listening to you, because you just sort of jumped into it. Like you weren't like planning to be a writer all of your life. You just were like, I'm going to write. I can do this just as well, if not better.
Um, I was only speaking to that one book I didn't like. Like I could do better than it. I wasn't speaking to the whole genre. However, I was a veteran reader of the genre of the historical romance genre by then, and I had opinions. I think that's the reason I had opinions. Like I am not a person of very strong opinions, and most of the time I'm like happy to listen to other people's opinions rather than express my own. But especially because I think in a way the development of romance, I think if you study it seriously, I think it can be a reflection of the places, the aspiration, the lives, the history of women in a sense in the recent decades. I think from the 70s coming forward, you can see how everything's changed and how everything. So when I was reading romance as a very young reader, like I was reading them as a teenager, I was of a younger generation, I think, than the writers who wrote them, for
Mm-hmm.
sure, because I sure hope they weren't, writing those books as a teenagers. Those books from the 70s, I hope it weren't teenagers writing them. Um,
I can imagine that
um,
they would.
so I was of a younger generation, and I think one of the things I say, for example, for private arrangements, the reason the private arrangement is about a young woman who actually committed a serious mistake. She like, this is a it's not only a it's not only a like a wrong call of judgment. It was there's a slight like moral line that had been crossed. Um, and the reason I wanted to do that was because I read so many books. Oh, it felt like I at least opened so many books, because I have a habit of, if I don't like a book, I just don't finish it. It just felt like I've opened so many books that's about a very innocent girl, and this guy just assumed she did something bad
Mhm. Mhm.
when she didn't do anything bad. There's a big misunderstanding. And I was like, I just felt like it had been done to death. So I wanted a storyline that was not a misunderstanding at all. I wanted them to like have a good relationship that fell apart because precisely because of what she did. Like there's like no mistake about what she did. There's no innocence. She's not innocent. She did it.
Mhm.
Um so that was in my way, like I was kind of rebelling somewhat against what I thought was too much and what I didn't want to see anymore. Um so I guess in a way, and I'm also the kind of person, who doesn't eat the same thing for dinner.
Of course not.
Like like I have to remind my mom, if I say I like something, don't keep giving it to me.
Mhm.
Because I might, even if the things I love the most in the world, I would only want to eat it once a month. Like I don't want it every day. I certainly don't want it every meal. Um, so so that's why I guess my books were different, because I want something different. Like if I had read it, and even if I read something I really loved, I want to switch it around.
Mhm.
One of the easiest thing to do is do gender bending, right? Like you said, you liked Not Quite a Husband. Not Quite a Husband was what took place after there was a movie called The Painted Veil with Edward Norton and Naomi Watts. And normally I don't watch movies that's the equivalent of literary fiction. Um, but I did this one because I didn't know what it was about. I just thought, oh, this is a romance. It's a, like a lush looking romance with people who have like wronged each other and who had to make it up. That seemed exactly right up my wheelhouse. And all throughout the watching of this movie, I was thinking to myself, oh my God, this is like a Laura Kinsale romance. All these glances, all these silences, all this um until the moment. This is a movie that's like almost 20 years old by now, so I'm not afraid of spoiling it for you until it's based on a book that's even older. So until at the end he dies, and I was like, what, you know you did all this, everything to get to this point, and he dies. Like, what's with this? So as I came out of movie theater, I was like, I am going to rewrite this, but not have anybody die at the end. And I just basically switched genders. So instead of having a male doctor who's kind of like very socially awkward and like a social butterfly of a wife, I just switched the gender around.
Mhm.
And Luckiest Lady in London, somebody mentioned, is basically my take on The Lord of Scoundrels.
I was just going
Yeah.
to mention that. I was going to mention Loretta Chase because I love her so much. But and I want to get back to this in a second. But I was going to say that for me, there were certain turning points in romance, like the '70s, like you said, '70s, '80s, the bodice rippers they called them, and then we got the Julia Quinns and the Loretta Chases, and then I think we got you and your cohort of writers, and then we got like more
Very good
recently,
cohort.
yeah,
Yeah.
like there was like the Kennedy Ryan, really like hard hitting contemporaries. So I think it's amazing that you were part of that. For me, the third wave of writers, and I think what I said, private arrangements, the Not Quite a Husband, and the Luckiest Lady in London are all part of that. So what was happening for Luckiest Lady for you?
Um, I I just it was I'm a huge admirer of Lord of Scoundrels,
Hmm.
and I think in many ways it was like the perfect romance novel. And but of course, then I will ask questions like, okay, so what if after if you one of the very pivotal one of the most pivotal piece of writing is that prologue, in because Dane is an asshole. So the prologue explains why he's an asshole, and does a really good job so that you are willing to read the rest of it. And so I thought to myself, okay, what if I give somebody a similarly tough background, but instead of turning into the Lord of Scoundrels, he turns into the ideal gentleman. Like he instead of like hiding his vulnerability beneath this boorishness, this exterior that make people want to run away. Instead, he is like the extremely attractive, like, and it will make people want to orbit around him, and that's how he exerts his power. Um, so yeah, that was just the question, and the book was my answer.
Mm,
So yeah, so like I
well,
said, if I see something I like, I go, ooh, what if a little twist like that, and His a Night is actually it's kind of like a twist of Meredith Duran's Written on Your Skin, because her Written on the Skin had a heroine who was pretending to be kind of an idiot.
mhm.
And I read it and I loved it. And I was like, let me have a hero pretending to be an idiot. Like a simple switch around. Just like, you know, if you see a Sherry Thomas book you like, you can ask yourself, um, if I switch the gender around, which book was this?
Somebody else's. Well, I was going to say about Lord of Scoundrels, it wasn't that people wanted to run away from Dane; they wanted to shoot him. So I won't go
Only
into any.
the brave ones shot him. Everybody else, all the other ladies ran away,
Right,
right?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Okay, so I think I know the answer to this, but Emily wants to know: do you always use the same pub name for your books?
Well, I always use the same.
Yeah, yeah. So are you always Sherry Thomas, or do you use like different names for different genres?
So far, I have only used Sherry Thomas, and this was I think this was a little unusual from the time I came from the Jurassic era, because in the Jurassic era, I think people who often, but then again, I don't think I ever wrote enough books for me to need. Sometimes people needed a pseudonym because they were writing too many books, and I was never that fast. But also, I thought I might have to write YA under a different name, because before I got a contract for YA, I had actually written a erotic novella. I don't know if people have read it. The Fitzhugh trilogy actually is like a series of 6 stories of various things, 3 full length, one very very short story, and 2 novellas. And one of those novellas um, is actually in Tempting the Bride. The hero was, there are snippets of a erotic novella he wanted the heroine to publish or something like that. And then I just thought, I want to write this whole thing out, and I did. And so it was like, full on, like, I really liked it. It's basically like nothing but a lot of good banging.
Well, if there's going to be a lot of it,
And
it should be good.
yeah, so I already had that. And my YA publisher said, "Oh, that's okay. People who read your YA books, they wouldn't find it unless they really want to."
That's fine. Well, I mean, there's like,
So I have only ever written under Sherry Thomas, and it is my plan that as long as I wrote books that fully conform to genre expectations. So, if it's romance, it has a happy ending. If it's a mystery, it has, the mystery solved at the end. So as long as I wrote works that conform to genre expectations, I will use Sherry Thomas. But there is a book that I'm thinking of writing that I may write under a different name. It will be my first. Let's see. I haven't written it yet. And let's see if I can write it as well as I hope I would like to. And then I see if my agent can sell it. And then I see what name they want to publish it under. But I already have my name picked out.
ooh, anything you can tell us?
Oh yeah, it's I don't often mention it. I keep thinking people know about it just because I talked to 2 people about it. But but I've always wanted to write a story about reincarnated lovers. It is a very common trope in the Far East, but it's not so often in the West. And so for years, I wondered how to write this. What is the framing story I would use to support? If like if if these people have known each other for 7 lifetimes, this is basically like, it requires a framing story. Like, how do I get a different story in which to slot in? And finally, I realized, oh, this is going to be speculative fiction.
Mhm.
Like, it will be speculative fiction. It will be a space voyage, and it will have these reincarnated lovers. So yes, so that is all I can share for now. But I'm very excited about it, and hope my editor's not listening to this because that is not a book she knows about.
We'll find out. But being Indian, I'm all over the whole reincarnation thing. I think that would be
and,
awesome.
and and their first incarnation will be in India. This much I can tell you. Their first incarnation will be in India. It will be in the time of the Buddha.
Ooh,
The Buddha will be saying to them, come and and they'll be like, no, we're too in love, and he'll be like, I can already see the next 7 lifetimes for you guys, and it takes them like several thousand years to get through these 7 lifetimes.
oh my God.
So it will be
So
different for sure, but it will be like this. I can already see the marketing for this book if it ever comes. Like, is this the greatest love story of the greatest love story known to mankind? Like that M dash, or is it?
well, Kirian says that they would actually totally read that book, and as would I. So Virginia asks, in the Home series, there are a number of characters on the spectrum. What was that a conscious decision, or did it just happen? And she really, truly loves Charlotte and her friends and her cohorts.
Yeah, it's absolutely a conscious decision. Partly is because I have a child who's slightly on the spectrum, and so I have nothing like Charlotte. He's absolutely nothing like Charlotte. But I've had, the privilege to observe him growing up from up close and see how interesting and both how interesting and how different and how inspiring that journey is. And so and also I think in recent years, the modern adaptation of Sherlock Holmes, whether it's BBC Sherlock or Elementary, I think they've all like given some sort of like um, slight on the spectrumness to the characters. So I'm not necessarily breaking new ground right there, but probably the new ground is that she is a woman who who exhibits these certain tendencies, and of course, then her sister, Charlotte has a sister who is like a lot on the spectrum and cannot look after herself, and that came from an experience I had attending. So my child needed speech therapy for a while when he was in elementary school. So that's considered special education. So one time they invited parents with kids in special education to attend just a meeting, and it wasn't until I was at that meeting that I realized how severe some other kids in the program, their condition was. Like, basically these were like kids in preschool, so 3 or 4 year olds, and the lady running the meeting was already telling them how to get on the state list, to get on this waiting list right now, so that when their kid is 18, after which there's no longer like public support, so that they could get on the waiting list when they're 3 or 4. So by the time they hit 18, they could like sort of be on Medicaid list. They could get some help from Medicaid. So I kind of went home all shaken about it, and like when a letter came from my kid's school saying, "Congratulations, your kid no longer needs speech therapy. He has graduated special education." I like cried.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I will always remember how tough these other parents have it.
Mm-hmm.
And Charlotte's sister is a reflection of that. Like, people like Charlotte's sister exist.
Mm-hmm. Do you pull from your own life and experience a lot in your books, do you find?
No, I do not. I do not like. I am one of those people who like my escapism to be complete. So in that sense, I don't want to read about myself in a book.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really. So for example, even though Hazel in the Librarians, she is the Asian diaspora, the Chinese diaspora. What the percentage of Asian that she is? I think there's some like some not Asian blood in her, but she's mostly Asian. But I didn't set her in China, for example. I set her background as Singaporean, which is, Chinese diaspora, but very far away from my own life. I like setting, because I have to read these stories myself repeatedly as I write them. So I do not pull from my own experience. It's almost very, very rare that you can look at something and say, this is Sherry Thomas. I think, but I try to write things I can understand. Like if I were in that situation, if I were that person, I can imagine, I can sympathize, I can understand. So that's what it is. It's
Mhm. And since the librarians has had such a great reception, I mean, I was reading the reviews earlier today. I mean, they're just stellar. Do you think there'll be more librarians books from you?
uh, I was told specifically that this was a standalone, which is
Oh,
why I tied up all the plot lines, because I was like, if there's going to be other books in the future, I don't need to tie everything up so neatly. I can leave some stuff hanging, but they said, they said standalone at the beginning. And as I was finished writing, I asked again, they said standalone. So I was like, cool. But things, I don't know. There's no standalone that's an absolute standalone, right? Because as long as people are still alive. and But I think the thing that would determine whether it gets any sequels is not necessarily the reception, but market, not necessarily critical reception, but market reception. If the book is a runaway success, chances are that people might want sequels. But if it's, I'm of two minds about it. One, I love these characters so much, but two, I tied everything up so nicely. I don't want to undo any knots. So,
I mean, like the Thursday, Mystery Club. I'm very sure there'll be more of those, right? Because it was a runaway bestseller. But every librarian in the country is probably reading this book. So those are those sales for sure. Um,
none of my books have been runaway bestsellers, but oddly enough, you actually could make a living at this without, if things will sell steadily over the years, that's another way of selling also.
mhm. So
So that's what I'm hoping for the librarians. I will keep finding an audience who might enjoy it.
mhm. I think it'll be perpetual because there's always new librarians. Um, has Lady Sherlock ever been asked to be a TV show or a movie? What is it called? Optioned.
Option. Yeah, it has been optioned before. But my agent, I think she said somewhere that she had written like literally 100 options for her clients' books before one was actually made into anything.
Mm.
So I'm not in a big like I am not holding my breath waiting for Lady Sherlock to become anything audiovisual. It exists in it exists and can be enjoyed as such, which is
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of times us readers do not want our favorite books to be made into TV shows or movies because it's almost always worse. I mean, they don't do like the justice that we want. We can't see the actors in our head, like that kind of stuff. So I'm completely fine with just reading everything you ever write. Um,
Sometimes you get lucky, right? There's always the Lord of the Rings. Look at that adaptation.
well, I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying as a reader, we often are like, oh,
Right,
it
right,
wasn't
yeah.
it, you know. But if you can take it on its own without comparing it to the book, you will often enjoy it. I think that's my opinion. Vicky wants to know, do you travel a lot for your story research?
I don't necessarily travel a lot for my story research. I never been to England until I pretty much finished my historical romance career. But I was just on a cruise recently. In fact, I stepped off it yesterday. And like I always had to remind myself the day after my cruise is this talk. Um, so um, so but during this cruise, because it stopped in England, I was like, this Lady Sherlock 9 is set um, on the southwest coast of England. At least part of it is set in the southwest coast of England, and it's set on a very specific stretch because in my previous book, I had mentioned that Lord Ingram had a cottage, and I had given a specific location for the cottage, which I don't necessarily do with other places, other actors, but that was set a very specific location. So as I was writing this book, I was like, I kind of forgot what this place looked like. I'd been there twice, but it was like pre-pandemic. So I was like, okay, my cruise ship is going to stop in the UK, and there'll be several stops. So I kind of talk to them. I say, I'm going to leave the cruise. I'm going to set foot on England, and I'm going to leave the cruise. I'm going to take a couple of days, go to the coast, and then come back and rejoin the ship. Mm-hmm. And they're like, sure, good luck. And so I did exactly that. So I on my first day, I stopped at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. And then I went to this place called Exeter, which is where you would change the trains, either going to the coast or coming back from the coast. So then the next day, the major day, I got up in the morning, took the train at 8 o'clock, got to the last train stop, and then took a bus to the coast. And then here was where things went a little pear-shaped. So my Google map hadn't been doing a terribly good job for the coast, but because I was on the ship and I assumed it was just like the Wi-Fi wasn't all that good. So when I asked how long would it be for me to walk from this spot to that spot, it said that's a 10-mile distance. It will take you 4 hours. I was like, 4 hours, not at all a problem. I'm a strong walker. So I started, and then 4 hours later, I came across a sign. The place where I want to hit was still 8 miles away. Now, this is not Google Maps' fault, because I am walking along the coast instead of in the interior in a straight line. And the coast zigzagged, and it climbed up and down majorly. So, and when I saw the number 8, like it says, the spot where it's going, and then I had the number 8. And then I'd been in Europe for the week before on this cruise. So I was like, 8 kilometers. Like, can I still do 8 kilometers? I was like, okay, I have 8 kilometers left in me. And then 2 hours later, I suddenly thought, oh my God, no, I'm in the UK. I'm in the UK. It's 8 miles. So I accidentally walked 17 miles that day. And the thing was, at my first place on the coast, the place where I wanted to eat was closed. I wanted to buy some Cornish pasties, and it was closed. And I was like, plenty of pubs along the way. There was nothing but wilderness the rest of the day. So I walked 17 miles, like 7 hours on like mostly empty stomach. So
wow.
This is that I have to say that accidentally, that's the most dedicated I've ever been to my book research.
Well, you definitely, have outdone pretty much anybody I've ever heard of in research. Well, this has been wonderful, Sherry. Thank you so much for spending your hour with us and answering all of my various questions and all of our questions.
And thank you, everybody. I'm sorry I can't really see the chat as I'm talking, but thank you so much for being here and for asking questions.
Yeah, we had some good ones, but we will look forward to the next, obviously the Librarians. If you haven't read it, definitely read it. And the next Lady Sherlock is coming out when, do you think? I know you just finished it today.
Right. Nowadays, publishers no longer set publication dates before the whole manuscript has turned in. Used to be, I'll start writing and they'll tell me the publication date. But now it's like, I'll turn it in and then they will set it. So I don't know yet. Hopefully next year. But with the printing crunch, the what it is, I won't be surprised if it doesn't come out until beginning of 2017. 2027. That's also another possibility. But fingers crossed that end of 2026 then.
Okay, good. We'll look forward to it. And of course, that speculative fiction one that you're going to be writing it under a pseudonym. But thank you all for being here tonight, and happy reading. Sherry, I hope to talk to you again soon.
Okay. Thank you so very much, everybody. And thank you, Mina. Thank you to the library.
All right. Good night, everybody.